to the Regional Contract 101 class. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them at any time. There's no question too small, too stupid, but keep in mind there's no answers too stupid either, so don't hold me to that. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so just a little brief history behind contracts. So this is the regional contract, and we have an MAR contract as well, Maryland Association of Realtors contract. Some of you guys who've been in the business a long time, a lot of you have been used to using the MAR contract. Some of you have started using the regional. Some of you are like, what's the difference? Why are there two contracts? Basically, the Maryland Association of Realtors contract covers all of Maryland, has all of your clauses that specifically fit your Maryland laws. But understanding that there's a lot of agents who do business in Maryland, DC, and Virginia on a regular and consistent basis, this regional contract was created, and a lot of it was created with the Northern Virginia folks as well, because a lot of them were doing business. There wasn't a Virginia statewide contract. So it gave the ability to, let's create kind of a base model that you can add on different addenda, but at least all of us can work off the same contract, and then when we go into each individual jurisdiction that has its own individual jurisdictional laws and rules, we can add those jurisdictional addendums. So the regional was born probably about 10 years ago. And what we've seen is, primarily most of the business done inside the Beltway is almost exclusively all regional. You will not see an MAR contract. Outside the Beltway, it's been about, kind of a 50-50 split. And we'll go over one of the clauses that's really changed. It's kind of changed the regional. I see now probably about 80% of all the contracts are all, even outside the Beltway, are regional. A lot of agents are going in that direction. So just from a show of hands, what are you guys using? Regional?
Regional.
Anyone using MAR exclusively?
No,
okay.
But if they ask for it, I do.
Yeah, and there's also we have two offices that are basically border towns that are on the Frederick Carroll County border and then on the Howard County border. So there's a reason to know. You got to know both in this office. I think it's healthy to know both. So what we did the MAR contract last year. So today we're going to go over the regional in depth, just to kind of point out some of the differences, but just make sure you understand, just even from a contractual point of view, what does this stuff mean, and where does it, where the rubber meets the road? Where does this affect your buyer and seller at the end of the day? All right. Any questions, kind of starting off?
Howard and Frederick use the MAR, right?
Yep.
See, now we don't. We use the regional for Howard because we can check right there which county for the Maryland under the jurisdictional addendum.
Yeah, and you have to add in a
well, we've got other
addendum.
Howard County forms. Yeah.
And there's a regional addendum to the Howard County form.
Yeah.
Most Howard County agents are not familiar with the regional.
Oh, okay.
So I would recommend, if you're going outside of Montgomery County, using the MAR contract.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's got all the stuff built into it. It just works very well outside of Montgomery County.
Just Ellen is just so, she really likes the regional.
Yep. All right, so a couple quick things. You got an introductory paragraph. Basically, it tells when the contract was made, who the purchaser, who the sellers were, who the listing and selling company are. No mention of agents right yet. And then is the selling company representing the purchaser or the seller. One thing just to point out, contract date is important. It's one of those things that we usually, it's an identifier for that contract. Because sometimes you might write a contract today and contract gets denied, falls apart for whatever reason. You wind up writing a contract for the same people on the same property for the same sellers 6 months from now. And sometimes that contract date will be the indicator as to which contract you're speaking of. I know, Bob, when they write their legal letters about this, that, and the other, they reference contract date. So just a minor thing. All right.
But that's the date that it's written, not ratified.
Correct. Yep, that's the date that it's written, not ratified. All right. All right. Paragraph number 1. real property. This is where you basically tell them which property you're speaking of. It sounds pretty simple. You know, this is where you put the address, legal description, as much as you can get. One thing that has tripped up some folks is sometimes you get a property that they're selling a property, but they're also giving you an outlot A. And do you write a separate contract for outlot A? How do we include that? Or because it's an MRIS, it's automatically included. I always recommend make sure you're very specific. If it includes something that may be a little bit out of the ordinary, make sure that's put in here, that you add that clause in there for what's exactly included.
So you would put in both tax ID numbers, maybe?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'd put, you know, if it was 123 Main Street, I'd say and outlot B as well.
In the description.
Yep, in the description or in the, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or you can put it like in the street address line, depending on where you have room for it. Yeah, Bob.
It has tripped up title companies for years in the MAR contract because all the MAR contracts gives you is an address.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have tunnel vision, okay, we're searching 104 Spruce Avenue, but they didn't tell us that there was this other parcel that had its own tax ID number, and we get close to settlement and they say, hey, wait a minute, what about that other partial lot or outlot or whatever it is? So it's extremely helpful. The regional contract avoids that. But
right.
If you're dealing with the MAR contract and there is more than one parcel, please let the title company know.
Yeah.
So we can search the title properly.
Yeah, and we also recently had an issue with TDRs, including TDRs into a contract.
What's TDR?
So it's very rare that you're going to run into this, but some farm and horse properties include a TDR. It's basically a development right that comes with the property. It's value. It's got value to it potentially. So if you are having a property like that does have TDRs, you want to be specific. Are these included or not included? And let me take one quick second. I got someone here who needs something. Yeah.
Right. You know
Sorry about that. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. Paragraph 2, jurisdictional addendums. This just notifies the other party. Again, this contract can be used in basically 2 states and 1 district. And then you want to notify which counties these are in. Again, I don't recommend using this outside of Montgomery County. Again, MAR has created a jurisdictional addendum that allows you to use the regional outside of Montgomery County, but I haven't used it yet. I'm just not so sure it's quite ready for
Can you use it
prime
in
time.
Virginia, or do you need it separate?
Oh, you use this in Virginia, definitely, and then just use all of the Virginia forms jurisdictional. Yep. But just outside, using Montgomery, I'm sorry, Howard or Frederick. Carroll, PG. I'd use the MAR.
You use MAR in PG?
Well, PG you can use both. PG is okay.
Anne Arundel.
Anne Arundel, MAR.
MAR. So
Yeah.
basically anything outside of Montgomery.
I would recommend using MAR. Yeah. Because the addendums just fit a lot better with that MAR contract. Just like in Montgomery County, what you'll see in Montgomery County, so there's 2 contracts in Montgomery County you can use, MAR and regional. All of the addenda, the way GCAR writes their contracts, it's basically to make the MAR look like the regional. So it's not the other way around. So sometimes there are some holes in the MAR and the addendums when you're writing in Montgomery County that just aren't as smooth as it is when you write with regional. Okay. Paragraph 2 is jurisdictional. Paragraph 3, pricing and financing. There's a couple ways to do this. A is your down payment. So this is basically when you're looking at your financing, if you're doing 80-20 financing, A is your 20%. The financing, if you're getting a first trust, second trust, or seller-held trust, this is where you put those amounts in. 1, 2, and 3 should equal your total financing. A plus B should equal your sales price. One issue I do see with regionals, though, is, okay, so we go in at 300 on a 350 townhome. We put in what our down payment is based on a 90-10 financing. We put that 10% in, dollar amount in there, and then the 90% financing amount. We wind up negotiating up to 325. Sometimes people don't change what the down payment is and don't change what the financing is. And I think you need to make sure that that's done, because this is where you're basing your finance contingency off of, is basically these ratios that are in there. One thing some folks do is they put, instead of putting a dollar amount there, they put 10% and 90%. And all we do is we negotiate the bottom line. Make sense?
Yeah.
So that way you're not having to worry about going back and recalculating A and B, and then having 2 more initial spots. Or if you've been going back and forth 15 times, you're going to have 30 initial spots extra. Yeah.
So if it's all cash, how do you indicate that it's all cash?
Just put down payment, it's the full amount.
Yep, down payment. Yep, exactly. Would be your full amount.
Except they're not getting, okay.
So the down payment's not your earnest money.
Right,
It's what you're bringing to settlement.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Jeff, when you use an escalation clause, this has to be changed also, the front page, right?
Correct. Yep.
I mean, if it changes, it says that.
Yep. Okay. All right, moving on. C is the first deed of trust. Will they obtain or assume a fixed or adjustable rate first trust? I still haven't seen many assumptions yet. I imagine those might be coming down the pipe 5 years from now if the rates go up. We just haven't seen many assumptions. Bob, have you seen any?
No, I can't tell you the last time I saw an assumption.
Yeah. I asked Karen about it, and she said she rarely ever does them, but it's one thing if you are getting into an assumption situation, you got to contact the lenders anyways to get the full financial picture. Again, assumptions worked in a previous market where someone had locked in at 10% interest rate and the rates went up to 17%. Made a big difference. That was a big selling point to have that assumption.
The problem with assumptions was when property was appreciating in value rapidly, you had this $200,000 loan, but now the property was worth $300,000, and people were interested in assuming that rate, but they didn't have the delta. They couldn't come up with the money between the existing loan and the purchase price.
Wow. Just think about that.
So are some conventional loans assumable? Or is it
I
just
imagine they
that
could be.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it says that the deed of trust says it's only assumable with the permission of the lender,
Yeah.
There might be some
which they're not going to give if it's a nice low rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
Well, they can get 8% instead of 5%.
Everything's negotiable.
Yeah, that's true.
So again, with these, and even with MAR, and this is what trips a lot of people up with MAR, you still always, in Montgomery County, you will need a separate financing addendum. Unless you're doing all cash, you'll need a separate financing addendum for FHA, VA, which you've always needed, but also conventional. One thing, again, trips people up with MAR. MAR has a whole financing paragraph in there. Why do you need a separate addendum? It's not until you get to the Montgomery County Jurisdictional addendum that it says, forget what you just read about financing, you need a conventional financing addendum or FHA or VA financing. Yep.
It's just that now that we have addendums for conventional, and we no longer put the interest rate on the front of the contract, so that is their finance contingency is the addendum that we're writing?
Yes, that's going to be there. I'd still fill out, and you're talking about an MAR?
Well, there's no place to put the interest rate on the front of this, is there?
Correct, no.
There is on the MAR, though.
There is on the MAR. But again, you would also look at what the what the lender's letter says, too, because that's going to be part of your specified financing.
And some lenders don't put the interest rate on the lender's letter.
Yep, they should.
Approximate, I guess.
So as a listing agent, you get a letter that doesn't have an interest rate on it. What does that mean?
That means you probably would like to know that. Let me double check the. Let's see here. Let me look at the.
Yeah, what are the rules for that?
Well, it used to be that it was on the lender's letter.
Well, the interest rate is on financing.
I'm sorry, it is in the conventional financing.
Yeah, and then it.
That's right here.
No, it is in the conventional financing,
Right.
right. So that's why I'm saying, you had said that the front page of the regional, or front page of the contract, kind of states their finance contingency. But it has to really go to this where the interest rate is, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, paragraph D is for second trusts. Paragraph E is for assumptions. Again, we're rarely ever dealing with them, so I'm not going to really delve into assumptions. Okay, paragraph 4, deposits. You'll hear me sometimes screaming from my office about deposits, how I wish we never had to take deposits.
We're
It
far
is-
enough away, I don't care.
Yeah, you will.
Uh-oh.
Deposits are the biggest problem I'm dealing with right now, and our agents are dealing with. I think a lot of it's the climate in the market. Buyers are a little less well qualified than they had been in the past. They're financing more. There's more options out there. We've seen in a lot of places inventory's gone up. So buyers are, settling for a 9 out of 10. All of a sudden a 9.2 comes up. We're in the middle of our home inspection and buyer wants to pull out, haven't done their home inspection yet. Seller says, why are you backing out? Buyer says, well, I got my home inspection, I'm backing out. I can back out on my HOA docs if I got to back out on that. And the seller says, well, that's not a good enough reason. I'm going to hold your deposit. I'm running into a lot of this right now. So, here's, I can't give you advice on helping your buyers not changing their mind, because that's happening out there, but there's ways you can kind of protect yourself on this deposit. So basically, this is purchasers deliver deposit to escrow agent. There's 2 people who can hold the deposit. Basically, it's a broker or a title company is who holds it. If we as the broker hold it, and typically if you're the buyer's agent, you're going to put it with us. If it's if you're the listing agent, they're going to put it with their broker. We've got to deposit them within 7 days. Our office policy is 5 days, so you get it to us. Let's say you get it to us on day 5. We have 2 days to make sure we get it into the bank, so that it goes in. So that's how. So 5 days to get it to us, and then we have 7 days total. If you're running into any issues with your deposit, you have to notify the other party. Let's say you get, we put the deposit in and deposit check bounces. And that
Oopsie.
happens sometimes.
Sorry.
They haven't transferred the funds or
They
for
haven't
whatever
transferred the
reason.
funds, they
Right.
cut it out of the wrong checkbook. I mean,
Right, it happens.
if that's the case, we need a certified check immediately to put in. If there's any delay or any problem with that, we got to notify the listing agent to say, look, we're having an issue here. We don't have funds, and leave it up to them what they want to do. By not notifying them, now we become kind of accomplices to the crime that's been committed. And that's the way the state of Maryland looks at it, is basically we are agents for the state of Maryland for these deposits. They look at us as, we have a very few jobs in this world as realtors. One is to make sure that we get all the agency disclosure forms correctly done and the property disclosure forms done. Second thing is make sure we manage our trust accounts. And if we're not managing the trust accounts, that's basically the state's relying on us to do that, to make sure that there is, kind of our bond with the public, that it is trust. It's that, someone's giving you a $5,000 check for, collateral on the purchase of a property, that we put that money in, and it's in there. There's not a lot of, there's no mercy in this world. So if you are having a problem with deposits or you've got questions, please let us know. Don't just hold it in your wallet and hope things work out the next week. Because, so I've had to maybe say, look, hey, I thought I was protecting my client. We were having a problem with the other side, and, I thought if I deposited it, my client would get mad at me. Well, now you're on the hook for the $5,000 deposit. if you're lucky, you know, because
Yeah.
if the state comes down on you, the state's usually going to fine you a lot more than that.
Whoa.
Mhm.
The one case we did have, the person, we had a detective here, and the person who got us a fraudulent check was a known criminal, but the state didn't care. They said, you didn't put it in a timely fashion, slapped us with a $25,000 fine. We got it negotiated down to $7,500, but they don't, homie don't play that.
Yep.
So just, you know, I hate being worried about deposits, but this is serious. This is a serious one. Okay, so other things, if you're dealing with short sales too, I recommend doing a small initial deposit. Once you get third-party approval, then putting a larger deposit in to make all the parties happy.
What do we do when we're dealing with short sales, foreclosures, and they want, we're working with the buyer and the broker of the seller wants to hold the deposit? I'm just not comfortable with
Yep.
that.
Tell them to go pound sand.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am not comfortable. Again, we've had enough of these situations, especially with short sales, because sellers flake out.
And you see it often.
Yep. Sometimes the sellers flake out.
Listings, a deposit to be held by.
Yeah.
It's custom in the Baltimore area for the listing agent to hold the deposit.
In the Baltimore area?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not fun.
I'm not a big fan of it. Granted, you know, I still have to abide by all the rules and regulations, but I'd much rather us hold it than the other party hold it, especially if it's an attorney who's representing the seller, because they have different rules and regulations, and you know, if they decide to release the deposit to the seller for some reason,
Sometimes
unbeknownst.
it's the bank. Like on a foreclosure?
On a foreclosure, yes. On a foreclosure, yeah, you have to do it. And
You do,
that's the only,
So you've got to send your deposit over to that bank.
that is a,
So if it falls apart, it's going to be a while getting that money back.
not necessarily.
No?
Yeah, at least in our experience, you know, there's a big gap between what a short sale is and what a foreclosure is. Granted, from the property point of view, condition-wise, sometimes they look very similar, but from a negotiating and contractual point of view, they are night and day. The bank, you've got someone who can make a decision. You've got people who are at the wheel, making sure this deal goes through. As opposed to a short sale, it's a pig and a poke. You got a seller who potentially could do something, you know, and
Win the lottery or
well,
pay off the house.
that ain't happening. But we've had sellers just vacate, flee.
Yeah.
We're trying to get our deposit back. I've got to send a certified return receipt letter if I can try to get it out for the buyer's behalf. I never get those back because I send them off into space, and I get the return receipt undeliverable 30 days later. So with deposits in Maryland, I can send a 30-day letter. It never works, though, because it's either they're gone, and I can't find them, I can't get it to them, or they're going to dispute it. So if they get my letter, they have 30 days to dispute my letter, and they're going to dispute it. Yeah.
So, sorry, so again, maximum $500 initial deposit for the short sales for that reason. And then when the third party approves the short sale, then another $5,000 or whatever.
I think that's reasonable.
At the point that, at what exact point would the buyer come up with the additional $5,000?
Usually at third-party approval. Once you have that written third-party approval, then we put a bigger
Would
deposit.
you write it in there?
You can write it in here. Yeah, because it says purchaser has delivered a deposit check to escrow agent of number amount check, and or you can put in here $5,000 by note due and payable on. You could put.
That's already correct.
Yep.
So you would literally write
Yeah.
that in upon third party approval. And that way you're more secure that the buyer's not going to lose that money.
Correct. Yeah, you don't have it sitting in an escrow account at the mercy of the
that
seller.
money anyway, even if it's short.
What's that?
And the buyer's agent, as company should.
But you would hold that.
Who
would
holds
be
the
an arbiter.
deposit in a short sale?
Yeah, the
Is
short sale,
it the
we-
buyer agent's
Yeah.
broker, or is it the?
In a short sale, yeah, the buyer's agent broker wants to hold it.
So we have that comfort that you're holding that.
as much comfort as you're going to get, yeah.
No, I mean, that's seriously,
As
that's.
opposed to putting it with, you know.
With a listing.
The listing broker is going to have the same rules I apply,
Okay.
you know, but if they're putting it with an attorney who's, let's say, negotiating it, I mean, right now we have a situation where we've got an attorney negotiating a short sale for a seller. We're on the buyer's end. Actually, the short sale company, this is how they get paid. It's basically they keep buyers' deposits and negotiate with the buyers at the end of the day. They negotiated in the beginning of the contract for a very high deposit. It was multiple contract situation. All right, you know, agent and client said, yeah, we'll go up to $6,500 on this deposit. Now, you know, we're trying to negotiate. You know, buyers got out on the HOA docs. They want to keep the deposit. Now they're negotiating with us, but it's like $1,500 goes to, you know, Short Sales Solutions LLC. You know, $1,500 goes to the seller. $1,500 goes to XYZ LLC Realty. You know, and then the client will get $3,000.
So be very, very careful is the message. And so if there's a dispute, then if Remax is holding the initial deposit $500 and the additional $5,000 or what have you, if you're holding it, then there's much better of a chance to lessen the potential for not getting the money back to the buyer.
If you put it with an attorney, let's say who's negotiating the short sale, they're not. I've got a certain set of rules. I can't do anything unless I have a couple things happen. And you know, settlement, court-ordered releases between both parties, and that's about it. I can't make, and I can write my 30-day letter, which is pretty much worthless. Some attorney who we don't know may decide that, you know, based on the circumstances, they make a judgment call and they release the deposit and come sue me, you know, kind of thing. That's where it's just, I don't know if you know, again, they make it you know, there's, all attorneys are good folks, I'm sure.
Ours is.
Ours is excellent. But again, you know, there's definitely, I just, you know, kind of as a rule of thumb, I wouldn't put it with on a short sale, I wouldn't put it with the attorney negotiating the short sale.
One final question, please. So what if in a short sale they insist that the deposit be held by, you know, by their short sale company that's making it happen, and we don't want that, then
again, it's your client's decision at that point. I mean, it's their money, it's not ours, and you know, you give them all the advice that you can give them, and if this is do or die and this is what's going to make or break it, then maybe it's okay. We risk our $5,000 to get what we really want, and it's worth that risk, or it's not worth that risk, you know, because we're not 100% sure we really want this. So that point's gonna be up to them.
Would you tell them I can't assure you that, you know?
I have concerns. You know, I always have concerns if we're putting it with a third party, especially. Okay. I got some concerns about putting that deposit.
So these are the potential pitfalls of doing that.
Okay.
And just to let you know, if you do a short sale, once the buyer and seller sign it, it is ratified. So the deposits have to go in at that point. There was always some confusion. Okay, well, it's not signed by the bank yet, so it's not really ratified. But in a short sale, it is ratified.
Okay.
If the buyer, because it's between the buyer and seller at this point, not really between the bank and the buyer.
Got it. Okay.
All right. Yeah. And again, I apologize. We talk a lot about this this deposit, but it's one of these things that just is it's coming up a lot now. And just to let you know, we always need releases, no matter what your buyer's getting out on. If you've got a ratified contract, you will always need a release signed by the buyer and the seller.
And if you're unable to get it, I still haven't gotten mine. I email them every day, and
yeah,
it's coming. And
what I tell folks, there are, what is it, the 7 stages of loss. You know, I swear to you, I see this all the time. You know, 90% of the releases we get come back signed, but it usually takes about a week to get signed. You know, seller's not happy the contract fell apart. You know, they feel wronged. So there's anger, there's resentment, there's, sorry, they just
crying, denial,
right? Right.
Denial's first.
And they go through these stages, and it's, well, I feel so wronged, and I can't believe this happens. And a lot of times the listing agent's sitting there going, okay, release the deposit, but they also realize that, they need to be the shoulder to cry on, so they're not going to push hard on the seller on day one to get that release signed. So usually it takes about 7 days before we get them back.
Eased into slowly.
Yeah, and again, it depends on what reason you're getting out. I always, when it comes to getting out of contracts, the easiest release to get signed is usually home inspection, because usually you give the seller a fair chance to kind of, here's a back and forth. You won't fix this. I'm not buying your house. Go ahead. Don't buy my house. And it's kind of a mutual, like, I had my chance to, like, tell you how I feel.
Yeah.
So usually sellers sign this pretty quickly. The second one is the HOA docs or condo docs. It's one of those things that, rarely is anyone getting out really on what's written in the HOA docs or the condo docs. Sometimes with panel trucks and Montgomery Village and things like that, there are reasons why, legitimate reasons, but typically they're getting out for some other reason. But because the state of Maryland, the way the law is written, it is a blanket. You don't have to give a reason.
Right.
You can get out based on the font of the
Yeah.
HOA docs.
I do not like
Whatever it is,
that.
you don't even have to state a reason. So at the end of the day, the seller realizes that, look, this is, shooting into the wind. It's not going to happen. The third thing that's the hardest one to get out on is the financing.
What?
Financing is always an issue, because there's always I have your lender's letter said you were approved. I have your financial information sheet that says that you made this much and you have this much assets. Okay, so now you're telling me you have this problem? Why didn't you put it over here? Or this doesn't line up. You're saying you don't have enough cash when you're showing you do. And this is where it becomes a little bit of a, investigation into, fraud and what happened here. So,
Right.
and I'm just from my
Where you did
experience,
something after the fact, maybe?
you did something after the fact, or you didn't disclose something up front.
Yeah.
I didn't pick the lender. I'm the seller. I didn't pick your lender. You picked your lender. If your
It
lender,
doesn't say that in the contract. It says that if you turn down for financing, that you get your money back. I mean, it says that.
as long as you haven't defaulted, and there's the 7 deadly sins and the financing addendum, and sellers, and a lot of times sellers don't read this stuff. They assume
But they-
put a $5,000 deposit in. If you don't come to settlement, I'm keeping your $5,000.
Right.
So the listing agents kind of got to go back and try to explain why the buyer is backing out. Seller's like, well, you never told me that. So, sometimes this situation happens, and sometimes the listing agent. And one problem we have a lot of times is the listing agent is telling the seller bad information. They goofed, but they're not going to go back and say, yeah, I got to go tell my client I completely screwed this up, and we'll get your release in 24 hours. They usually kind of sit there and stone face and they're not going to admit they made a mistake, and nor do they have to, because there's basically it's agent to agent as opposed to a client.
Yeah.
We can go directly to the client and say, look, this is what exactly happened. This is how this reads. Sometimes you got to pull third parties in. Sometimes I'll talk to the manager to try to find out what happened. The relationship's going to change once I talk to their manager. I always warn people about that. But at some point, it's
Worse or better?
it gets worse.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Never.
Well, I'm just saying between you and the other agent. A lot of times, again, I ask the agent, I'm like, well, who's the company? It's like, or I'm sorry, I say, who's the agent you're working with? Oh, it's John Smith. Who's the company? John Smith LLC. I'm like, well, we're screwed.
We're screwed.
Yeah, but there are good companies out there that I can usually talk to the manager, and we can peacefully talk about what is going on. Sometimes you guys are really close to the situation. You guys have been dealing with this jackass buyer for a year now, and finally found a property. They lowballed 7 contracts, and the listing agent on the other end, this guy is like nickel and dime them down, and cut their commission, and they finally got them under contract. And you guys are both just gritting your teeth. Now we're having an issue, and it's just like you guys are just emotionally, and it happens. So sometimes we got to come in and. Sometimes I talk to the other manager, and they're just as
they're just as fed up with theirs too. Yeah.
Right. So that happens, and sometimes we can come up with a peaceful solution and cut through the BS. And the other manager on the other side, we just talk to their agent and say, look.
I think you're still holding it at 5 years ago.
We probably are. I mean, we had one that was 7 years old that we just released.
Whoa.
That's unbelievable.
Rona?
statute of
How much of
limitations.
an EMD do you get on a foreclosure?
It depends on what the bank wants.
Joe, I have one question about that. So I just had that scenario where we had a ratified contract and we did a release based on the home inspection. But the question is, and I got it back pretty quickly, it wasn't that bad, but the question is, okay, so we did the home inspection, we got our list together of, 20 items, they sent it to the seller within our time period. And, they took, my question is, once we've sent that addendum to them about our home inspection repaired, how many days do we have with the back and forth? So they had to get back to us, I think, in 72 hours.
Depends on the contract, because MAR is going to be different.
We had a regional.
Okay, we're using Montgomery County. If you're using the Montgomery County jurisdictional or Montgomery County addendum clause, it's going to be 3 days back.
Well, we actually used the regional, it was Howard County. And then we had...
So if you use the MAR inspections one, it depends on...
or could we use the regional inspection one? Because I can't remember.
There's no regional inspection
Oh, there
one.
isn't
It's going to be the GCAR addendum of clauses, which is going to be your 3 day.
That's what we had.
Back and forth, back and forth. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's going to be 3 days.
So then they had 3 days, then we had 3 days, and it just keeps going on and on until you make a decision.
Yep.
Okay, because I was just a little bit, I wasn't sure exactly, because they were taking every time we go back, 70 hours out of 72, because they were just playing games. And what they did is they strung it out so that we wouldn't back out, and we'd agree, because it was 9 days before closing, we did the release.
Yep.
And they could not believe it. But she was happy, and she found something else, and
Well, how long, in that case too, how long do they have after you agree, okay, this is what we're gonna do, terrific. Do they have up until settlement to get those items taken care of? Ah.
Question about the back and forth with this topic. Isn't there a point where the seller can declare the contract void?
Yeah, they can. And the buyer can accept the seller's previous, and that's the one little, kind of going off this, talking about addendum clauses, which we're going to do a whole class on that as well.
Okay.
But just so you know, when you're going the back and forth, at some point someone can just declare, you know what, we quit. The seller can and the buyer can. We quit. The other party has the right to say, well, I'll accept your last offer. So in theory, buyer says, let's keep it simple, I want $10,000 for all these home inspection items. Seller says $5,000.
yeah.
Buyer says, I void the contract. Seller says, okay, I'll accept your $10,000 offer. You sell the contract. Yeah.
Okay.
So if your buyer's really looking to get out, they have one chance, and that's the first initial offers to make sure that they void it.
So, but sometimes, we say, okay, we've got the seller, the buyer comes with their request for repairs. Seller says no, buyer then comes back and takes half of those things, or half the money, or whatever, and seller says, no, I declare this contract null and void. And then buyer can say, well, I accept your last offer. And then seller's gonna say, I'm sorry, I've already declared, I don't wanna sell it to you.
Well,
That's their problem.
then you're gonna have to someone sit down like Bob and read the contract to them in a really soft voice, slowly.
So that would not be a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, but again, the seller can just decide, you know what, I'm not gonna sell my house. This happens from time to time. People go off the contract and
So the seller can say, I'm just not gonna sell my house at that point.
Yeah.
How can they do that?
how can they do that? They can write an email to their agent that says, I'm not selling my house at this point. Yes, no, it's not a contract. You can sue them for performance. There's all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's based on the contract. No, they don't have that right.
And sometimes it gets personal between the sellers and the buyers where,
Oh, yeah.
And then the seller will say they don't want to sell to this particular buyer, they just,
Yeah.
But you could also have a seller who's kind of not all in, doesn't really have to sell.
Yeah.
And then the deal starts, it starts costing him more and more money based on home inspection.
Yeah, and this happens a lot
Like
with
a
MAR.
seller.
This was one of the problems with MAR. We'll get to property condition hopefully at some point. Is that there was things that the seller was required to fix, and we had these situations where the seller negotiated for 3 weeks, got it to a bottom line price, and they're like, I'm done. And then the buyers to the home inspector say, no, you got to fit. Now you have to, you must replace the HVAC system, and you must replace the hot water heater, and you must. So
Is
it's like,
that true?
no, not in Montgomery County, and especially not with the regional. In
But
Montgomery
maybe
County.
with MAR?
Not with MAR either.
It's really kind of gray, that MAR.
No, it's not.
It's not?
It's in the MAR, but we take it out with Montgomery County jurisdiction.
Okay.
It's just nowhere to be found in the
Original.
regional.
So either contract, the buyer and seller can both get that out. But
In both contracts in Montgomery County, it's as is. Yep. Okay, moving along, down payment. So the down payment is basically, needs to be certified funds coming to settlement. Oops, sorry, top line. Right here, number 5. So remember on the first page of the contract, we had that down payment. That's basically, if it's all cash, that's going to be your down payment. It needs to come in certified funds, don't come with personal checks. Number 6, settlement. Seller and purchaser will make full settlement on or before this date, if mutually agreed upon. Be really careful with these dates, you know. Again, these become sticking points with settlements. Sometimes we put these settlement dates in there and then we change our minds. Sometimes people aren't going to change their mind on those settlement dates. I would say call the listing agent ahead of time. Don't stab in the dark to find out what settlement date they're looking for. Find out what settlement date they are looking for first and figure out, okay, is this something we're going to have to negotiate, or is this something this is a concession we can give right off the bat, because we got to work on the price. Purchaser selects, and this is where you put the settlement agent in here. Don't put TBD in here.
No?
Nope. Because the seller may decide, okay, I'll determine it.
Oh.
Other things you need to look out for is sometimes I've seen some lenders push, they put the title work with someone else. They'll push it to their own title company that they work with. And we've had those situations come up. And they're very aggressive about who's going to do the settlement and when and where. It's almost a race to see who can start the paperwork.
So what should we put there if the buyer has not chosen a title company, or do we have them choose it?
I have them choose that. Yep.
Well, what happens if you're doing both sides? If you're representing the buyer and the seller?
You can't represent the buyer.
Well, if you're representing the seller and you have a customer,
right.
buyer customer,
Yeah, customer.
you put something in there. Yep, you put a settlement
Okay.
in there. There's a really good one. They're really close to here. I think.
Oh.
What's her name?
Home settlement?
Home Settlement Center. Yeah, they do settlements. They do a pretty good job.
I was just curious.
That's the default entry.
There you go. That should be boilerplate.
It
Put
should
that
be
right
boilerplate.
And in this, they say the buyer will agree to contact the settlement company within 10 days. This is a great thing. Bob knows there's some titles issues that come up. They try not to tell you guys all of the awful things that are going on in the background, because sometimes there's just some little glitches come up. You know, the seller's got an unreleased trust that needs to be, signed. You know, it was a private loan that became a lien against the property. They work really hard on getting these things resolved without disrupting the contract and getting everyone upset about something that isn't really an issue. But the sooner you get it to them, the better it is to make sure these issues get pushed out of the way.
Well, if we do it right away, even before the home inspection, and things fall apart at the home inspection, is my buyer client going to be charged anything?
Depends on the settlement company. Depends on how much they've done. Some, yeah, they're going to. Others, depending on what a great client you are, they're going to eat it. They're going to say, no, it's, things happen. And it also depends on how close to settlement you are, too. I mean, the title company doesn't, they don't start spending all of their money on day one. They realize that there's usually a contingency period. But they can do some precursory stuff, get some stuff in the pipeline.
Should we wait until after the home inspection?
No, I'd get it to them as soon as possible. Yep. And let them make that determination. And usually if you work with a good company, they're not going to, they're not going to nickel and dime you for everything if they know you're a good client, you're coming back. There are provisions in here, though, that, if one party defaults and things like that, that the title exam fee can be, will be paid by the defaulting party. All right, paragraph 7, this is our property condition paragraph. So this used to read that the heating, air conditioning, plumbing, electrical systems in the home are included. The seller has to repair those. Now it doesn't. So basically what it says here, except as otherwise specified, seller will deliver the property free and clear of trash and debris, room cleaned in substantially the same physical condition as determined as of, okay, so backing up, broom clean, free of trash and debris. You know, yard debris is also considered debris, so keep that in mind. Your guys got the big wood, you know, disgusting wood pile in the back that all the branches. I've had some situations where buyers have claimed that that's debris and they want it hauled off the property. So just keep that in mind. That sometimes comes up.
What happens if I have this situation right now, my buyer literally just texted me, if they've already moved out, we settle at the end of the month, who's going to be cutting the grass between now and then? So in that case, the seller who's moved out of state is still responsible for that?
As long as they're not violating any local jurisdictional law, no, they don't have to cut the grass. It's not a requirement that the grass is cut, unless it's over and above what the county
1
says
foot,
is
I think it is.
Unless it's 1 foot over.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, and that happens. And what's broom clean, and you know, how clean is your broom that you use to clean the house?
Would that be an electric broom?
Yeah.
So it's better to have contract date.
You don't?
So no, not necessarily.
Or the bathroom?
So when it comes to these three options, 99.9% of the time you're going to have in here home inspection date. Because what happens is you determine the condition of the property as of a physical date, and you have a report to determine what that physical condition of the property is. From that point on, the property can get no worse than when you did that home inspection. If you're not doing a home inspection, then contract date is your next best option. And you did a kind of a precursory look around the house, but it's kind of he said, she said at that point, because you don't really have a report. And so the property's being sold as is, so at the home inspection, the dishwasher worked. It doesn't work at your pre-settlement walkthrough, the seller's on the hook. If you did your home inspection and the home inspector was kind of wishy-washy on something was maybe work, but you should call a HVAC contractor just to make sure. It's not working at settlement. The seller may say, well, you were notified that it wasn't working. You didn't ask me to fix it, so I'm not required to fix it. So those are things you need to make sure when you're looking through your report with your home inspector and with your buyer. If there's some of those, may need more information, that might open the door for the seller to walk on a situation. So keep that in mind. Other would be settlement date. If you're selling a shell, if you're a listing agent, and you've got a shell property that there's a hole in the roof, the condition will be getting worse between contract and settlement. You put other and you put settlement date.
I read that wrong, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say contract date. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. It says in here, all utilities will be in service through settlement unless otherwise agreed. Sometimes with your short sales and foreclosures, this does create an issue because they've got to de-winterize a property or turn utilities back on, and who pays for it? Sellers, they went back to Denmark,
Yeah.
and who's going to pay for it? And sometimes it becomes, buyer, you can get this house for $80,000 less than market value, spend $200 to get the utilities turned on, is it worth it? If not, then we move on.
What about the liability at that point, if you have,
Burst pipes and stuff like that.
well, you have someone come in to turn on the water and the electricity, and even if you have licensed people and something happens, there's a fire, there's flood, who's liable?
I think that's, I'd want to indemnify our, if we were the buyers and we had to turn on something.
Like at no risk, how would you write that?
Yeah.
How would you write that?
There is no easy answer.
Yeah, but yeah, we could write something up to,
Okay.
If we get those kind of bizarre situations where we do have to turn stuff off
Try
or
to
something.
have these crafts on that
Yeah, because if I was having the power turned on in a vacant house that had been closed up for 6 months or something, I'd worry.
Oh yeah, and that happens, and there's a reason why the power was, or there's a reason why the water was shut off, or these valves were all turned off because there's a burst pipe from the winter. Yeah, so you got to be careful about those kind of situations.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's the only way to make the deal work. So it says here, continues paragraph, purchaser acknowledges Subject to seller's acceptance, this contract may be contingent on a home inspection. This is where you click yes or no, you're going to do a home inspection. Then the final paragraph in 7 is purchaser acknowledges that except as otherwise specified in the contract property, including electrical, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, equipments, fixtures shall convey an as-is condition, as of the date specified. So the only thing that's not included in this is going to be your well and septic and your termite. Number 8, access to property. So you're going to have a 5-day pre-settlement walkthrough. You have the right to do that walkthrough. And this is, when do you do your walkthrough? I recommend doing it as close to settlement as possible, because if something's going to break, I want it to break before we take possession of the property. But I also want to make sure if something's still wrong, I have time to get a contractor in there. We've got it. So what happens nowadays, it's really hard. In the past, we used to be able to do escrows. So we walk in, and the seller didn't fix this, or something now is broken, unbeknownst to the seller. Now it's, okay, dishwasher's broken, can't get the dishwasher guy out here for a week, we're going to have to escrow $1,000 to make sure we can replace the dishwasher. Nowadays, lenders don't like that. So what you got to do is, call your appliance guy and say, hey, what's it going to cost to replace the dishwasher? $725.33. We'll have the seller cut a check at settlement for $725.33. Be paid directly to the contractor. That works great in this marketplace. The problem is, though, you need time to get, the appliance company out to go get that estimate of what it's going to cost.
The problem with that is the check the seller wrote ain't good.
Yeah.
Well, we're cutting it out of his proceeds itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sure, thank goodness.
Yeah, we can't show it as an escrow on the settlement sheet, but we can put it as a repair item that the seller's paying.
Correct.
And
Yep.
the check has to
I'm
be
just
at that
clarifying.
time made out to the contractor.
Has to be made out to the contractor. Yep.
Coming from the settlement.
From the
From
settlement.
the settlement company. Yeah. The banks don't have a problem with that. They have a problem with the escrows. But you need to have enough time to get someone in there to get that a legitimate estimate in there, to make sure that we're, as a buyer's agent, we're collecting enough. So that's always something. That's the dilemma we're running into right now, as opposed to settlements at 1 o'clock. We did our walkthrough at 11. Maybe we do it the night before, the day before, just to make sure we have 24 hours if there is an issue. So I don't have a black and white answer on that. And I think some of it maybe, have the agent send you all the receipts. If they're not sending you the receipts for the repair items that were done, or you're getting a feeling that, hey, something's just not right here. Yeah.
And the problem was the repairman licensed and insured.
Yeah.
So he can't be the husband or who thinks he's handy, who fixes the. You should always specify that work has to be done by a licensed contractor.
Yeah.
And it isn't always done that
No.
way.
Well, but you ask them for receipts.
Yeah.
They have to send you receipt in the top of the letterhead that this is coming from, should say licensed insured.
Yeah.
Ellen won't take it otherwise.
And, and the investors try to get away with,
Oh, yeah.
because they have their team
Right.
of people that have
Exactly.
redone the house. And
That are not licensed.
Exactly. So,
Well, but you know what though, like I was gonna say just a couple of weeks ago, Ellen had that issue with that house on Lexington, that they did their walkthrough the night before, and of course there was still a couple of things that were an issue. So Ryan ran over there first thing in the morning, but it didn't matter because he'd given him a builder's warranty also.
Right.
He flipped the house, so, did all the repairs himself, so if anything were to come back on him, it would have been okay, covered it anyway.
Right.
But, yeah, home warranty and builder's warranty, it's always a good idea.
The other thing is, 8 is access to property. One thing we are running into also is sometimes buyers are switching mortgage companies. Sometimes they're switching them late in the process and getting a second appraisal now. So lender A had an appraisal, now lender B has an appraisal. And this has created some issues for sellers and some consternation as to, should I let this second appraiser in here?
If they don't want to.
Yeah, and I recommend let them in.
Yeah.
Let them, push their financing along. Again, if you don't, it's going to be an uphill battle.
With the access to property, I did have just a couple weeks ago where the seller wouldn't let us in until the morning of settlement to do the final walkthrough. So I could have said, well, we have the right to come, because we wanted to come in on a Friday, and settlement was Monday, because we knew things were gonna need to be
Yeah.
addressed. So what could I have done about that? Wanted to do that?
I mean, I think I don't, as a listing agent, I don't recommend, if the buyers want to do their walkthrough, let them do their walkthrough. It just raises suspicions by pushing them off. And there's some cases I recommend buyers, let's ask the home inspector to come back out. There were so many issues here.
They did.
Well, ideally, your walkthrough, would be when the house is vacant.
Yeah.
But how often does that happen? I don't,
Right.
everything's coming down to the last minute these days. The seller's not out yet, and you gotta do your walkthrough. That's not the ideal situation.
And you may not get that room clean when they haven't moved out until.
Yeah,
the
I've
night
had
before settlement.
clients leave settlement.
Yeah.
And go inspect the house, movers were still there, stuff happens. I mean, the seller didn't mean to have the moving truck break down and the C
Push
team
them back
shows
2
up.
days for
They're
moving,
stressed
yeah.
out, and you come for your walkthrough and they're still moving stuff out of the house. We've had situations where the title companies held
Or
the sellers.
there's a piece of furniture covering up a bad stain in the carpet.
If you're the buyer agent, and you're not being allowed for 5 days to someone walk through, would you recommend, or do you have the ability to push the settlement date?
If they won't allow you to have the pre-settlement walkthrough, you're not settled.
I mean, let's say they only give you 24 hours and you really want more.
I mean, because it does say 5 days, so.
It does say you have time within that, and
Right.
Within
it's
that?
this word reasonable, and it's, there's some situations where it's just not reasonable for the seller to allow you access.
But like in her case, if you knew that there were going to be issues, if you really need more than 24 hours, do you recommend?
I think it's going to be on the fly in those. It's really hard to have a hard and fast, because it's going to depend on what happens when you show up there. I think it does raise suspicions when sellers don't allow, when you ask for a time period and they don't allow it. But I've had legitimate situations where, the sellers they were neat freaks and their house was in shambles and they would be
Freaked out.
mortified to have the new buyer come in there. They just didn't want to have that stress. So they gave us a window and we went in, their house was immaculate. But they had cleaners come in, they just weren't going to leave the house a mess. And they're afraid we were going to do our walkthrough in a mess. And that was a good thing.
Yeah.
If that's communicated, then that's not so bad.
Exactly.
It is, but
That's
there's
how
always
it is.
suspicion, though. It's like,
Yeah,
well,
wow.
we met you for 15 minutes,
Yeah.
when we did our walkthrough, when we originally looked at the house 2.5 months ago. I don't know if you're really telling me the truth
Right.
or not. And that's the hard part of this, is figuring out where we are and what's reasonable amount to,
And because we can't ask for money for things that may not have been done or may not have been done by a licensed contractor.
Yep. Okay, 9, utilities, water, sewer, sewage, heating, central air conditioning. Many of these things are in your Maryland your Maryland property disclosure statement. So some of this is what you're going to be is pulling a lot of this information from the Maryland property disclosure statement. Virginia doesn't have it like this, so that's why they've added this paragraph in here. If you are selling the well and septic property and your clients want to do an addition, be wary of how many bedrooms the property is approved for septic, because it will limit how big you can make the house. Okay, paragraph 10, personal property and fixtures. Window treatment, screens, blinds, all those things convey in this paragraph header. Your wall-mounted electronical components and devices do not convey.
What is that?
What's that?
What are those?
Like for your widescreen TV
Yeah.
that's bolted onto the wall, that doesn't convey.
What about that, the thing it sits on?
The
The
bracket?
bracket. That's
No, they
causing
take that
problems.
with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's probably going to be part of the component.
So that should go, so therefore there's gonna have to be a
No.
repair to the wall
Yep.
and painting. So,
They should probably get that off within,
Now,
before
what if they
24 hours
What if they leave the
beforehand.
bracket?
so what if they do leave?
Yeah, what if they say, you say, hey, look, take that bracket down, there's gonna be 4 holes in my wall, I want that fixed, and they say, fine, we'll just leave the bracket.
That was, it's not gonna fit their TV anyway.
Yeah, well, a lot of them are universal.
Are they?
But they may not want the TV there. Yeah, that's a it's a first world problem. But it's
It is indeed.
I have a 70-inch TV, and that's only a 32-inch bracket. It's not going to fit my no.
That's
But
not one of the extra.
that's one of the things. I mean, we run into this. I mean, before even wall-mounted TVs, we had that with what do you do with you got paintings all over the wall, and you had brackets for really heavy paintings.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a judgment call as to what should be taken off, and we went to the walkthrough one time, and they took the bathroom cabinets, all the medicine cabinets off the wall. They also took the basketball hole too. But that's just they just
They took
thought,
the medicine cabinet?
What the
they took the medicine
heck?
cabinets.
Were they hung like a picture?
No, they were like they
Glued on?
well, they were hung. Yes, I'm sorry, they were hung up, but they were
Framed in, right?
these weren't framed in.
No,
But
it's
we've
something
been
you buy
seeing a
from
lot of-
Home Goods, hang up over your toilet,
Yeah.
and
A
they
lot
just
of
took it
bathroom
off.
mirrors disappear.
Say again?
Bathroom mirror. Well, I guess it is a
I've seen a
conversation.
lot of bathroom mirrors.
A lot of
disappear.
bathroom mirrors.
And this is a gray area. This really gets into
Yeah.
it is a gray area because sometimes I always recommend to my clients
If you want it, ask for it.
yeah, and if you are taking a lot of extra things off, you should go behind and patch repair everything that you need to take off. And if there's something specific like a wall-mounted bracket or speakers that are hanging there, if you are taking them off, make sure you're really clear that you're taking them off. Or if you are going to leave them, make sure you make it very clear that you're leaving them.
That's what this is basketball.
What's that?
What about the basketball hoops? Somebody really took.
Was it
And grabbed
gray?
it?
It was one of the ones. It's got a bracket, so it's got the ground case, but then it's got 4 big bolts that strap the thing on. They took it. And my client, he was like, that was like his thing. He's like, his wife was pregnant, and he was having a boy. He's like, he played high school basketball, and he's like, oh, we're gonna be shooting hoops at this, and he walks the walkthrough. He was just like almost like,
What happened to my basketball?
yeah, that's all I care about is the basketball.
Oh,
yeah.
And they have the right to take it?
No, they brought it back.
They did.
Yeah.
With the house we bought here in Olney in 1999, we had that put, our agent, who was in this office at the time, had her put that in the contract, that they couldn't say, it was asphalt, also was a whole basketball court in the backyard. Put it in the contract so they couldn't do anything.
Yeah, I just didn't think anyone unbolted basketball, but
Just to be sure.
yeah. A couple other things in here. So the house is being sold as is, but there are some things you're going to include that are as is, but that you really want strictly as is. For instance, there's a second refrigerator in the garage. You're going to include that, but if it dies between the home inspection and the settlement date, you'll take it out of the house, but you're not going to get it fixed. It was kind of a throw-in kind of thing. If there's those type of things, make sure you're really clear on this, that that's not included in that. It's as is, but it's as is up to the date of inspection. If you're being a nice guy throwing in something, you don't want to get on the hook for having to replace, that freezer you were going to leave for them. But if it conked out, you're not.
So would you write in, second, freestanding freezer as is, as of day of contract?
Settlement.
Of settlement.
Technically, that's the way you'd write it, but I put in there strictly, sold strictly as is condition. Yeah. They've got leased items in here. There really aren't. Basically, the leased items are typically your natural, so your propane tanks are leased.
Satellite dishes.
A lot of times they're just
You just stay.
Yeah, they just stay.
TV doesn't care to come back and get it.
Yeah,
Leave it.
yeah.
They could, I guess.
Okay, paragraph 11, this is application and financing. You have 7 days to make your written application for financing. So I guess in today's loan world, they need to have a ratified contract before they can technically make full written applications. That needs to be done in 7 days. But also, any insurances that you need for the property and the lender's going to require, flood insurance, property insurance, those all need to be made within 7 days. those of us who've been in the business a long time, we used to, the day of settlement, you call your, you're driving to settlement, you call the insurance company, you're like, oh, forgot about something.
Whoopsie.
First 7 days, make sure, and I always tell people there's a benefit now to doing it in the first 7 days is you get the clue report. Clue report lets you know if they've had any claims against the property. It's like a used vehicle history report. So it's good to find out, they've had tons of water issues here and we've got things to be worried about.
So if your buyer is uncertain at the time of contract exactly what financing program they're going to go with, doesn't that make it difficult to fill in the details on page 1?
No, you're going to know what financing program. They're basically, because they've had to come up with how much money do they have. And before you even start the process, they're going to want to know how much money they're going to have, what their monthly payment's going to be. They're going to have a very good idea. They're just not going to be able to technically, the way the lending rules are now, make a formal application until they have a ratified contract. They're going to have basically everything ready to go for that formal application. And some of that's just more of a technical rules point of view, because now there's structured documents that the lender has to provide the buyer, but they're not going to have those until they have a ratified contract. But you're going to have a worksheet done up. You're going to have all that background stuff like we used to, done ahead of time. Let me see here. This also allows us to disclose the status. The lender to disclose the status of the loan. One thing in here, it says in here in bold, the seller agrees to comply with reasonable lender requirements, except as otherwise provided in the lender required repairs paragraph. So basically, now that we went to this as-is contract, the seller isn't required to do lender required repairs. If the seller doesn't agree to do the lender required repairs, the buyer is going to be denied financing. But it doesn't lock the seller into having to do lender required repairs. But
even on FHA?
Even on FHA and VA, yeah, they're not required. But the buyer's going to be denied financing.
Right.
But everything else, the seller has to comply with reasonable lender requirements.
We don't know what reasonable is.
Right.
So they do not have, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. They do not have to fix lender required repairs?
They're not required, correct. But the buyer's not going to be denied financing if they don't do it.
Right.
That could mean that.
And when the appraiser
Yeah.
comes out and they find things, especially with VA and FHA, those things have to be fixed.
No.
No?
They have to be fixed to get the loan.
You can sell a VA or
But it used to be that the seller was required to do those repairs whether they liked them or not.
Around or not.
Now they have a choice to
They
make those
throw
repairs.
it on the buyer.
Sometimes that happens, yeah, the buyers will make those repairs.
And then the buyer's stuck paying for work on property they don't own,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
they never own.
Right.
But if it's a good deal, it's worth it.
And if those
They never
things
own it.
aren't fixed, the appraiser comes out there, and if those things aren't fixed, the lender has to submit
Uh-huh.
photos or whatever to show that they were fixed. The buyer's going to be denied the loan.
Correct.
But the buyer can pay to have them done ahead of
Right,
time.
yeah, I know that.
Okay. Alternate financing. So you can get alternate financing, but it can't delay settlement, cost the seller any more money, or not happen. So basically, it's the lender's letter you brought in there, and especially when you go to once you go to the financing addendum for conventional FHA and VA financing addendums, the lender's letter that you brought into the case, that's the lender and the program that you're going to need a denial letter from. You can go out and go get different financing if you'd like, but if you get denied financing from this other lender, even if it's the exact same program, you have to get the denial letter from the first lender. If it's a different lender and a different program, you have to go back to the first lender and get a denial letter on that original program. And that's caused a problem because sometimes, people have, switched lenders midstream, and now, lender A, this program, may not be available or something's changed. And we've had sometimes a hard time because they've dumped lender A, who wrote the contract. Now lender A doesn't want to give them a denial letter. We've had issues with that. You're not required to do alternative financing either. Sometimes that's a misconception.
Who's not? The lender?
The buyer is. buyers are required to do alternative financing. Because we've had some situations where it's like, well,
My lender can get it.
my lender does these deals all day long with, you know, this type of credit scoring and whatever. Even though it would be the same exact money to the buyer, it wouldn't change them. They don't have to switch lenders.
Oh, is that right?
You mean after they've been denied by lender one?
Yep, if they were denied by lender A, who wrote
They
the
could just
contract
walk,
based on
that's
all the,
Okay.
they don't have to go out and pursue alternative financing. Even if you use the listing agent, have exact same program, wouldn't cost them a dime more, wouldn't delay settlement, wouldn't do anything to change, but it's just, you know, written under a different lender, they wouldn't have to take it.
Are you saying that's basically a way to get out of a contract?
It is, but most lenders don't want to give a denial letter unless they have to give a denial letter too. They,
Chances are they'll get denied for the alternate.
if they get denied for, well, the alternate, it doesn't matter. If the alternate lender gives them a denial letter, that's irrelevant. They need it from the original.
But I mean, if you get denied by lender A, you're probably not going to get a loan from somebody else.
Well, sometimes you can. I mean, it just depends on how strict they are. You know, again, you know,
Sometimes the smaller lenders are a little more flexible.
it depends. Yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, Joanne can attest to that. I mean, it's changed. That most lenders are very similar now. There's we used to have big jumps between lender A and lender B. And a lot of times, once buyers chase down lender B, they find that, you know, at the end of the day, lender B really can't do it. You know?
It's usually credit, or they lost their job, they don't have the income, or something like that. Yeah.
All right, paragraph 13. Purchaser representation. This is basically, will they or will they not occupy it? There is a very small difference in the Montgomery County taxes, transport taxes, if they are owner-occupant versus non-owner occupant. There's, they got
34.
What is it?
343 or 334?
Yeah,
Split between buyer and seller.
Yeah.
Right.
about $150 difference, I think, for the parties. But it's not a huge amount, but it's there. Let's see here. Also states here again that it's not contingent on the sale, rental, settlement of other property. And this also gets into selling company is or is not authorized to disclose listing company, any lender, and any lender the appropriate financial credit information of your buyer. You know, financial information sheets. We talk about this a lot. How many of you guys are you guys getting them on every case? Half the cases? None of the cases? What's that? If,
On a contingency, you mean?
financial information sheets for the buyers.
I just do it every time also.
Okay.
Even though it's not required.
What do you mean it's not required? If
The
the
financial-
seller asks for it, it's required.
Yeah.
But if
The buyer won't give it.
Yeah, and this happens a lot. We're running into this a lot where buyers are less and less willing to give financial information sheets.
Right.
Outside of Montgomery County, Howard County, they don't even ask you for them. They don't ask you for them.
Virginia, no.
Yeah, in DC, usually some of your high net worth clients, they're not going to want to give them for disclosure purposes, and so we're kind of in the middle of. I think in a perfect world, I want them on every case.
I find if you include it in the disclosures, it says seller requests all buyers to.
With all offers.
With all offers, it's done. There's no argument. Once in a while.
They don't do it in the warehouse.
All right, termite inspections, purchaser versus seller. Most all the time, the purchaser is the one purchasing the termite inspection. On VA, the seller pays for it. It has to be 30 days within settlement, so you can't do them too soon. But there are times when you may have a big issue with the termite. The seller is required to repair any existing termite damage, which sometimes catches people off guard, even though the property's as is. This clause, you know, if you've got wood, destroying insects have damaged, a beam in the house, even though the house is being sold as is, you've done your home inspection, you're past your home inspection period, the termite guy comes back in and notifies this, the seller's going to have to repair that damage. It says here, and free of visible evidence of active termites and other wood-destroying insects, and free from visible insect damage.
So,
Any extermination or repair for damage identified in this inspection report will be made at seller's expense.
And there's no limit in this,
No, there's no limit in the regional.
but in the MAR.
In the MAR there is. I've never seen anyone hit that limit though.
And that would mean existing termite damage even if there's no active infestation.
Correct.
So if you buy a house that has it, you say, okay, well, I don't care if it's fixed. You might have to pay it when you sell it, right?
So if it's a cash deal, there's no financing, they still are required to have
Yeah.
a termite inspection within the 30 days.
They're not required.
What if the
They have
buyer-
the right to have one. At
They
that
have the
point.
right, well, see, if it's in the contract, that's what confuses me. So the buyer has the right, but it's not required.
It's not required, but they have the right. Just like a home
Okay.
inspection, it's not required by the lender. But
Right.
if the buyer has it in the contract, the buyer has every right to it and all the obligations that the seller has agreed to.
Right, but if it's a cash deal and they opt